Hello and welcome to another episode of the Top Dogs podcast here on the Field of 68 Media Network. My name is Rob Doster, and we have a blowout win to discuss. Once the Bugaboo team for the UConn Huskies, they go into Omaha and in front of 18,000 fans wearing pink and buying dollar beers, knock off the Blue Jays by 27 points. The final score there was 85-58. Creighton made a couple tough shots early on, but by the time we got to early in the second half, the most excited that fan base and that crowd got was when there were a couple of missed free throws that allowed them to get a free chicken sandwich. So go in there, handle business. That's what we call belt to ass. And it's the kind of win that I think UConn needed. Before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it, please rate, review, subscribe to this podcast anywhere that you get podcasts for absolutely free. We do appreciate it. All that interaction and engagement really does help with the algorithm. And we are all beholden to the algorithm in the year of our Lord 2026. There's not a lot to talk about in terms of kind of the X's and O's here, or in terms of the importance of this outcome, right? The win is what it is. Creighton is probably a crown team. They looked like they were going to have a chance to be in the NCAA tournament mix, but it just hasn't worked out. Owen Freeman hasn't been what we thought. Josh Dix hasn't been what we thought. He didn't score against UConn. Austin Swartz has been incredible, but he had 5 points on 5 field goal attempts. It was just kind of it was like a big brother matchup. And I think it says a little bit about where the Big East as a whole right now is, that UConn can go in there and do that to Creighton and nobody is really surprised about it, which is unfortunate, but losing Ryan Kalkbrenner is losing Ryan Kalkbrenner. That's a big loss. To me, what matters is that this was a game where some of the guys that had been struggling for the Huskies found a way to be able to get it going a little bit, right? Braylon Mullins came back from the concussion, scored 16 points, leading score, 4 for 8 from 3. Alex Caravan, a guy that had been struggling in recent games and been in a little bit of about a 3-game slump here, finished with 15 points, 5 and 9 from the floor, made a couple of threes, 5 offensive rebounds, did all the stuff that he normally does beyond just shooting the ball that makes him such a valuable piece to this UConn roster. Yeah, and Silas Demery again, 15 points, 6 boards, 5 assists. He continues to improve and continues to turn into a guy that just looks like one of the best point guards in college basketball. I'm old enough to remember when there were doubts about Silas Demery as a shooter and question marks about whether he was ever going to be able to make shots from beyond the arc. Well, the good news is that as things currently stand, he's shooting almost 45%, better than 45%, almost 46% from 3. In league play, he is shooting 56% from 3 while taking 3 attempts per game. And he has turned into as good of a point guard as you're going to find. One of the best, I think he's got the second best offensive rating right now in the Big East Conference. He's got the best assist rate in the Big East Conference. He's got a top 5 steal rate in the Big East Conference in league play. He's drawn nearly 5 fouls a game, getting to the free throw line. Like, everything that this dude is doing right now is everything that UConn needs him to do. Took a while for him to get there, but we are fully seeing the Silas Demery that everyone wanted at the start of the year, and the Silas Demery that if he comes back, like, his numbers right now are really similar to what Tristan Newton's numbers were in his first season with UConn. And if Demery comes back, I think that we could end up seeing like a first team All-American caliber year out of him next year. That's putting the cart ahead of the horse, however, because there's still some stuff for him to accomplish this season. What was nice to see is UConn was able to put their foot on somebody's throat, right? Dan had talked a little bit in recent press conferences about dealing with not having the killer instinct and having a roster there that doesn't necessarily find ways to be able to put teams away once they get a big lead. And that is exactly what happened here. And I think that is something that is significant because it's a departure from the norm from what we've seen from them in different games, right? I think about the game at Georgetown where UConn, I think they were up 13-4 and had a double-digit lead early, and there was a big run from the Hoyas, and they ended up taking a lead in the second half before UConn pulled that thing out despite missing a whole bunch of free throws late in the game. I think about the Providence game at home last week where you're up by 10 about 10 minutes into the game, and Providence is able to just kind of keep it at arm's length and find a way to put a little bit of game pressure on UConn. It was never really something where it felt like UConn was in danger of losing that game, but you weren't able. We haven't seen them really in Big East play yet. Turn it on, put take them behind the woodshed and just go belt to ass, and that is exactly what happened in this game. The biggest reason for that was because of the 3-point shooting, right? Like 16 for 31 from three, 16 for 31 from three. Part of that was Creighton. I don't know exactly what they were trying to do on the defensive end. There was some switching going on. There was some deep drop going on. They weren't guarding Terrace Reid at the 3-point line, which works a lot better when you have Ryan Kalkbrenner protecting the rim, and it isn't quite as effective when it's Jason Green or Owen Freeman down there trying to protect the rim. So that they kind of took advantage of the situation there, but that's what you want to see out of this group. That's what you want to believe that this group is capable of in moments where they are playing an opponent that is overmatched. Don't play down to their level offensively. And that to me is the biggest thing. I've talked a lot on this pod, and I think, look, I'm not going to dive too deep into this game because I think there's only so much you can take away from a team that is borderline top 75 in KenPom, right? I think that there is what you can take away from this performance, what you can take away from this win is that, this is a group, I've talked a lot about in this pod. This is a group that defensively, when they are clicking, they are going to keep themselves in every game that they play. UConn's not going to get run out of the gym ever. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't matter who they play. It could be Michigan. It could be Florida, the way that they played yesterday against Alabama. It could be Illinois and Keaton Wagler, who may just be the best player in the history of college basketball at this point. I don't think you're going to see a situation where anybody, Michigan, Arizona, doesn't matter who it is, anyone is going to play this UConn team and run away from them. That's just not how this team is built. They are too good defensively. They're too good at controlling the play pace. They're too good at executing what they want to do. And they've discovered the ability to win games because they are very, very good at, in clutch moments, being able to scheme ways to get shots right at the rim, being able to scheme ways to get layups at the basket, being able to scheme ways to get shots that are gimmies, right? And in crunch time, that is really important and really a way that they are able to take advantage of some of these matchups and some of these games that they are playing. As you know by now, we have teamed up with BetMGM again this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we will have special offers for Field of 68 fans, including same-game parlays, best-in-class live betting, and daily odds boost. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app, you sign up using bonus code FIELD, you deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. Make this college basketball season one for the history books. Make it legendary. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. There is no sport in America that is more difficult to follow than college basketball. It can be overwhelming. That's where the Field of 68 Daily comes into play. The Daily is your go-to source for injury updates, recruiting news, and transfer portal additions that actually matter. For just $50 a year, get access to the same information that your favorite team's coaching staff is subscribed for. Quality content can be hard to find in the college basketball space. The Daily is here to help you with that. So the game plan for what this UConn team has been so far this season is keep yourselves in games and understand that you are going to be able to out-execute whoever you play in crunch time. You're going to find a way to be able to get the shots that you need to get the plays in the clutch because you are better at being able to create shots around the rim than just about anybody else in college basketball. And the upside there is that anybody that has watched them, and we've talked about this on the Field of 68 After Dark, and we've talked about this right here on Top Dogs, and I'm sure that all the fans that are invested in this UConn team have talked about it as well. But the biggest thing is that you still have a ceiling to get to on the offensive end of the floor because some of the guys that we expected to be superstars have not quite gotten to the level of superstardom yet. And I think that you're starting to see, we saw flashes of it against Providence, right? Against Providence, UConn scored 1.21 points per possession against a team that admittedly is not a great defensive team, but they found a way to start get it going a little bit. 11 for 24 from three. It was better than what we've seen in recent games. Against Villanova, it wasn't great, but you're still at 1.16 points per possession. 8 for 22 from three. Solo Ball got it going in that game a little bit. So that one kind of mattered. You can kind of see the trajectory going in the right direction. And then you got the blow up against Creighton. They put up 85 points, but they did it on 59 possessions. It was 1.43 points per possession, which is about as good as we've seen out of them against a high major opponent this season, and it is certainly the best offensive performance that they've had from an analytical perspective in the Big East. There was the game against Xavier where they scored 90 and they were up by, I think it was 33-10 at one point in that game. But they kind of cooled off towards the end of that game. So the biggest thing is just that it's the offensive ceiling, man. And as these guys start getting a little bit more confidence, and as Braylon Mullins is able to stay in the lineup, and as God willing, we're able to get Solo Ball to the point where he is feeling a little bit healthier, and it looks like he's playing a little bit more consistently on the offensive end of the floor from a shooting perspective. That's when UConn goes from being a team that is really good, that's not going to get blown out, that can execute in close games to like, okay, they can also, if they need to, run somebody off the court. They can, if they need to, play some of these teams where they are not supposed to be in a close game, beat up on them, and allow some of these guys to get a little bit of rest. This is now a situation where instead of having to play like you did against Providence, instead of having to give Alex Caravan 38 minutes, and instead of having to force feed, Silas Demery and Solo Ball 30 plus minutes in the game like that, you're able to get them on the bench. Like Alex Caravan played 28 minutes against Creighton. And being able to let him get a little bit of rest at this point in the season, one of the underrated, most difficult things about this time of the year, especially if you are one of these teams in these power conferences that, it's different for UConn because they are competing for a Big East championship. But one of the difficult things to do is get your mind to the point where you are doing the little things that you do all year long because of how tired you get at this point of the year, and because of where your legs are at this point of the year, and because of the fact that, they've been going hard more or less nonstop since the start of June, right? We're talking about an 8-month run here where you are just grinding and working and grinding and working. And now it's 4 degrees outside and it's starting to get a little bit lighter for a little bit longer, but you're still dealing with, dark, the night coming on at like 5:30 or 6, and having to make that decision to get up and get moving when it is freezing outside, when it is in the single digits, and put in the level of work that you need to be able to put in when you're flying cross country 1 or 2 times a week. It's just like, that's a grind that takes a toll. And this is when you need to be able, like, if you can steal 10 minutes from your best players and they only play like 26 instead of 36, and they're able to save some of the effort, and you don't have to go until exhaustion, and you just kind of like, you're able to save that a little bit. That stuff really, really matters. And getting the blowouts at this point of year is the stuff that really, really matters, I don't think that this is, I talked about it before Big East play started, where because of the lack of depth in this conference, there was some reason to be concerned about whether or not this group would develop some bad habits and develop some levels of inconsistency and things where it's like, okay, they're winning, but they're not necessarily doing it the right way. But the reason they're not winning is because the shots that they are taking are not going down. That is a very different thing than they are making mistakes. They are not executing what they want to be able to execute. They're not getting the shots that they want. They're not getting the stops that they expect. And they're still winning because they're not playing somebody that is good enough to be able to beat them. That's not what's happening with this UConn team, or that's not what has been happening. Their issue was they were getting the shots they wanted. They're executing the way that they want to execute. They're not necessarily going down. Yes, there are some issues with turnovers. Yes, fouling is a little bit of a problem. Yes, all of that stuff was also a concern before we got into Big East play. All of that stuff was also a concern when you're looking at the games that they played against the best teams in college basketball back in November and early December. So it's not like this is an issue that has popped up during just conference play. On Tuesday, you get Xavier at home, which is going to be like, hopefully that's one of those ones where, you're 3 days after having to fly across the country to Omaha. It was a late night game, so I'm assuming they probably didn't land until very early in the morning on Sunday. And then you have a 2 day turnaround to get ready to play Xavier. Hopefully, you can run them out of the gym the way that you would expect to run a Xavier team out of the gym. And then you got the date with St. John's in the Garden against the St. John's team that is now sitting at 16-5 overall, 9-1 in the Big East. They've won 7 straight. It'll probably be 8 straight after, I'm assuming, they beat DePaul on Tuesday night at DePaul. But this is very much a St. John's team that looks like the St. John's team that we expected them to be all season long. And that is one of those matchups that at the start of the year, we all circled the calendar on. At the start of the year, we all said, okay, this is one of those games where you're going to have a national spotlight on it. You're going to have national eyeballs on this matchup. So we'll see how that ends up playing out. I'm going to do a preview podcast for it later in the week. I don't want to spend too much time on it right now because we got Xavier coming up, and because I want to find a way to be able to get a St. John's guest on that watches them a little bit more closely than I do. I'll be frank with where the Big East is. Outside of UConn games, I don't watch as much of it as I normally do, right? The focus tends to be on top of the Big Ten, top of the Big 12, frankly, Kentucky and some of those teams in the SEC. There's only so much bang for my buck, so to speak, when it comes to breaking down the film of St. John's beating Xavier and coming back against them. Yes, it's on TV. Yes, I got it on a Saturday. Yes, it's on the screen. Yes, I'm watching it, but I'm not sitting there the way that I would watch the Michigan State game or the way that I'm watching BYU Kansas. So I don't feel like I have a great feel for why the stuff is happening. That's probably the best way to phrase it, right? I can tell you what's happening. I can't tell you why it's played out the way that it's played out, the way that someone who watches St. John's a little bit more in depth can do. So I am going to try to find someone that can do that, that has seen those games, that has called those games, or has been able, like, is a fan that runs a podcast. If you got any advice, if there's someone in the St. John's Twitter sphere or St. John's content world that you think would be really fun to have on here and to talk through, please hit me up, send me a DM, mention me on Twitter, whatever it is, let me know, and I'll try to find a way to be able to get them on. But I didn't want to spend too much time on this pod today because I do think that there's only so much that you can take out of it. And frankly, I don't want to jinx it. We thought, at least I thought, after the Providence game, that was when UConn was going to turn the corner a little bit and find a way to be able to get this thing righted a little bit. But we'll see if that ends up coming to fruition. Last thing I'll say, and then we'll move on to the Xavier game, is that the consternation about UConn's turnover issues, I think, is something where they have actually turned a corner. They had 9 turnovers against Villanova. They had 10 turnovers against Providence on a game with a lot more possessions. They had 8 turnovers against Creighton, and against Georgetown, they only had 6. So after what we saw against Seton Hall and kind of the way that comeback by the Pirates manifested, I think we've seen a better performance from UConn here recently, which matters because this is a St. John's team that turns teams over at a top 100 rate nationally, and I believe is number 1. Well, no, they're number 2 in defensive turnover rate, behind Seton Hall and just in front of UConn in league play. So I will be in attendance. I will be at the Garden that night, and hopefully it will be to see UConn find a way to be able to knock off the Johnnies in Storrs South. Until then, appreciate you guys listening. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will see you again Wednesday, Thursday at some point, talking about UConn and St. John's in a preview.